So you want to know about the Dark Ages, eh? This time period happens after the collapse, and like that of the medieval time it's named after, it's a time where humanity had no way to grow or learn. It's a time period where it seemed like the darkness had won, but seemingly from the brink were these people that looked like us that had these new powers. Okay, that's vague. Let's explain it a different way. The Middle Ages of Earth are considered anywhere from the fall of the Roman Empire to the First Renaissance in about 1500 AD. The Middle Ages were also called the Dark Ages, but the term itself has largely been frowned upon by pre-Golden Age scholars. Basically, there was little progress within the Western European world over about 1,000 years in terms of written records, art, and economic or civilizational buildup. It just seemed like Rome was the glue holding it all together, and for generations of European people, they were meant to suffer by the hands of those that ruled over them. This was the time of kings, knights, lords, and rulers. This was the time when the general populace was held under the control of the church. Writing and reading were limited to a few, and much of the knowledge that existed in that time was limited to even a greater few. This description of the Middle Ages is no different of our Dark Age. The general populace of humanity was stuck under the controlling ways of the warlords. This group of war-raising humans seemed to have abilities transcendent of those around them, and others were seemingly being risen from the dead, some with faces that people recognized but knew they had lost in the collapse. So were these people named the Risen. The Risen started civil wars amongst each other, vying for who could control as much land as they could, burning down the small, meager villages that were under control by those that went against their rule. Basically, it was a bad time. What was found was that the small orbs of light that followed the Risen were the keys to keeping them alive, even after being shot and killed. The object of the wars were simple: target the Risen, then target the orb. We don't truly know how long the collapse went on for before the Dark Ages started to really kick in. What we do know is that records are scarce, but they, again, don't paint a very nice picture of the early Risen. They also showcase that we had to contend with the Fallen for our scraps, both species trying to figure each other out. This was part of the reason why the Fallen and humans just couldn't get along. We were confused about what had just happened, splintered and segmented as a species, lost to the darkness that had destroyed most of what we had built. Those that may have been in power from the Golden Age were quickly usurped by the Risen, and the Risen were proving to be the only ones that could fight against the Fallen, these scavengers that picked clean our towns and outposts that remained. One burned down village was the last straw for a certain member of the Risen. Radagast sought to bring the Risen together as protectors like the knights of old. Taking his place at the head of this group called the Iron Lords, they quickly banded many together to protect humanity in the best ways they could, trying to further unify the warlords that continued on fighting against the idea of unification and fighting against the Fallen threat. Eventually, this led to the Iron Lords mostly ousting the warlords, killing those that didn't conform for their final deaths once again. At this point, we had little knowledge just how important these little orbs were to us and how unable we were to create them again. At one point or another, there was a gathering of humanity under the Traveler, with rumors being spread that this was the last safe bastion on Earth. This is where we found the Speaker and many other Risen starting to group up and find more ways to form together. This is also the first time we saw Siva be pulled from the pits of Rasputin's holds, and only a few are alive to account for the events that ensued from that time. We have no idea why Rasputin's been quiet since, or what else he has planned for us after destroying Siva in recent years. All we know is he wasn't happy the first time. This was also the time of the fall of the Iron Lords, with Saladin and Aphrodite being the possible last of their line. There were still plenty of battles that ensued against the Fallen in this time, however. Some of the most well-known were the Battle of Six Fronts and the Twilight Gap, though the positioning in the timeline is a bit hazy on these events. Again, just like that of the Middle Ages of humanity of old, records are slim, with passed down stories being a common means of knowing how these battles played out. If you ask Lord Shax, Lord Saladin, or Zavala for some information on these battles, you'll find that there are different tellings no matter who you ask. Then again, a warning, don't ask them at the same time. Well, I wasn't cleaning up the punched holes in the wall. That's what Sweeperbot's for. Don't tell her I said that. Anyway, the Dark Ages led into what we now have today, the City Age. I don't think we need to honestly cover most of that, as these are events that have transpired over the last several years, but there have been some figures of note to rise within this age, namely that of Brazilazir, Osiris, Pahanin, Holborn and his host, Anna Bray, Fireteam Toyette, Toland. My list is pretty long here. Needless to say, the Dark Ages had their heroes, but it wasn't until the city was started to be formed with the walls around it that the orbs of light that revived the risen were called ghosts, and their bearers named guardians. That's me. That's you. We have a storied past, and it's one that reminds us not to let these powers go to our heads. It's one that tells us we can go off and do our own thing whenever we choose, but we have to and really should be fighting for more than just ourselves. The Earth is smaller than we think at this point, and without working together, we'll just be another group of warlords dead on the pile of rocks they once fought for. I think that's where we'll leave it, class. If you're interested in hearing about the events of the City Age, let me know with a comment card, or pass along other thoughts and other ideas for different lessons for me in a card as well. If you're not sure what to say, leave the phrase Dark Ages after today's lesson name. Subscribe and sign up for more lessons like these, and hit the like or dislike button on your way out so Ikora knows how I'm doing. If nothing else, thank you for being attentive, class. I'll recommend that Cade give everyone some extra meal rations for the week. Dismissed, Guardians. See you next lecture.